When Lily Carter inherited her late uncle's decrepit estate, she thought she was just gaining an old farmhouse to restore. But when she discovered a hidden underground bunker beneath the property, the quiet inheritance turned into something far darker. Inside, she found army vehicles, worth millions, locked away and waiting for a purpose. What started as a simple project quickly spiraled into a journey of secrets, danger, and a legacy she never expected. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. If stories like this pull you in mysteries, hidden treasures, and untold legacies, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode unravels the full truth behind what Lily has discovered. Let's get started. The farmhouse stood at the end of a long dirt road, where the trees had all but swallowed the pavement. Lily Carter wasn't sure why she had agreed to come here, to this forgotten place. The house had belonged to her late uncle, Uncle Hank, who'd passed away unexpectedly a few weeks ago. To everyone else, he'd been a recluse, someone who'd stayed out of the spotlight and kept to himself. But to Lily, he'd been a distant figure, a man she barely knew. She had inherited his estate, a deed she hadn't expected, and one she didn't know what to do with. Now, standing in front of the weathered porch, she felt both an uneasy connection and the overwhelming desire to leave. The farmhouse was crumbling, its paint chipped, the roof sagging under years of neglect. Despite the warnings from her parents to let it go, to sell it off, Lily couldn't shake the nagging thought that there was something here she needed to understand. "All right, let's see what you've left me, Uncle Hank," she muttered to herself, pushing open the creaky front door. The smell hit her first, the scent of mildew, dust, and the unmistakable mustiness of old books. The house hadn't seen much company in years, save for the occasional neighbor dropping by. Inside, the rooms were dark, the wooden floors worn thin, and cobwebs lined the corners of the ceilings. But what caught Lily's attention wasn't the state of disrepair, it was the strange feeling that lingered in the air, like a memory refusing to fade. She wandered through the living room, which was sparsely furnished. In the back corner was an old leather chair, cracked with age, and beside it a small table with a stack of yellowed papers. On the table was an envelope addressed to her name written in her uncle's scrawl. She sat down and slowly opened the envelope, pulling out the letter inside. It was short, a mere few lines, but its contents caught her off guard. "Lily, I've left you something important. Don't trust anyone. Go to the basement. It's all there. Don't forget to bring the key." The words lingered in her mind, their weight settling heavily in her chest. Her uncle hadn't been one for cryptic messages. He had always been straightforward, almost too blunt at times. So why had he left her this? What was so urgent that it had to be hidden? She scanned the room, her eyes landing on an old map hanging crookedly on the wall. It was partially covered by a heavy curtain, but she could make out enough to recognize a familiar name: Fort Bragg, the military base where her uncle had spent years working after his time in the army. The letters were faded, but there was no mistaking it. The key. Where had she seen it? Her eyes flicked to the kitchen, then the hallway, and finally, beneath a dusty shelf near the stairs. There, half hidden by an old box, was the small brass key. "Guess I'm going downstairs," Lily murmured, the uncertainty in her voice mingling with a hint of excitement. She made her way to the basement door. The heavy wooden frame creaked in protest as she turned the handle. The steps leading down were narrow and steep, the air growing colder the deeper she descended. At the bottom of the stairs, she found herself facing a metal door, one unlike anything else in the house. It was reinforced with steel, the kind of door you would see in a high-security facility. Lily's heart began to race. What had her uncle been hiding down here? She took a deep breath, the key cool in her palm. Slowly, she slid the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. The door groaned open, revealing an underground bunker, the likes of which Lily had never seen before. Rows of military vehicles, massive, intimidating machines lined the walls. Armored trucks, Humvees, and combat vehicles, all gleaming under the dim light of the bunker's overhead lamps. The space was vast, cold, and eerily silent, as if the vehicles were waiting for something. Lily's breath caught in her throat. This was no ordinary inheritance, and this was just the beginning. Lily's feet echoed in the cold metal hallway as she took tentative steps further into the bunker. The air was thick with the smell of oil and something metallic, a scent that reminded her of her uncle's old workshop. It was clear that this place hadn't seen much use in recent years, but it was meticulously organized. The vehicles were lined up with military precision, each one gleaming despite the dust that had settled around them. Her fingers brushed against the cold steel of a nearby Humvee. It was an intimidating machine, its matte black exterior almost blending into the shadows of the room. It looked like something straight out of a war zone, designed to withstand any attack. The size of it, the weight of its presence. It was hard to imagine how something like this had ended up here, hidden beneath a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. Lily felt a strange mixture of awe and confusion. Why would her uncle, someone she had always thought of as quiet and reclusive, keep something like this buried here? There had to be a reason, a connection she wasn't seeing yet. As she continued to explore, she spotted a set of filing cabinets against the far wall. The labels on the drawers were worn, but she could make out a few words. Classified, Operation, Project. Curiosity drove her forward, and she pulled open the first drawer. Inside were stacks of files, some yellowed with age, others still in pristine condition. Her hands trembled slightly as she began flipping through the documents, her mind racing with possibilities. These weren't just records about military equipment. They were about her uncle's involvement in a top-secret operation. Words like secure, classified, and quarantine jumped out at her, each one sending a cold shiver down her spine. Lily's fingers stopped on a worn folder that looked different from the others. It had a red stamp across the top. Highly confidential. With a deep breath, she opened it, her eyes scanning the first page. The document was an official military report from a few decades ago. She read the name at the top of the page. Project Spectre. She turned the page, her breath catching in her throat. There it was, her uncle's name, alongside a series of military officers and engineers. The report detailed a covert operation to store and protect several high-tech military vehicles, including the ones in the bunker. These weren't just ordinary vehicles. They were equipped with advanced technology, designed for missions so classified that the details were buried deep within government files. And according to the document, her uncle had been the lead security officer responsible for overseeing the operation. The report mentioned something about assets being hidden and protected for a reason, but it didn't go into detail about why. Lily set the folder down, her mind racing. Her uncle had been involved in something far bigger than she could have ever imagined. But why had he kept it all a secret? Why hadn't he told anyone, especially her? As she pondered this, a soft sound broke the silence. The faintest of footsteps coming from the direction of the stairs. Lily's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't alone. She spun around, her eyes darting to the narrow staircase leading back up to the farmhouse. But there was no one there. The noise had been faint, almost imperceptible, but it was real. Lily's breath quickened. Had someone followed her here? Had someone been watching the house, waiting for her to uncover this hidden bunker? The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. It was too quiet, too still. The vehicles, the files, her uncle's strange involvement in Project Spectre, all of it felt like pieces to a puzzle she hadn't even begun to solve. And now, someone else seemed to be involved. Someone who knew far more than they let on. Lily quickly closed the drawer, her fingers fumbling with the metal handles. The silence in the bunker felt suffocating. She grabbed her phone, her hands shaking as she texted the one person she could trust, the only person who might be able to help, Colonel William Thatcher. I need answers. Her thumb hovered over the send button. Was it too late to trust the colonel? He had come to her doorstep earlier, warning her about the danger of the vehicles. But could he be trusted? Or was he part of the very thing she was trying to uncover? Before she could decide, her phone buzzed, the vibration jarring her out of her thoughts. It was a text from an unknown number. "Get out of the bunker. Now." Lily froze. The message was simple, direct, and it sent a wave of cold dread over her. She had no idea who had sent it or how they knew she was here, but it was clear that someone didn't want her digging any deeper into this mystery. With a racing heart and a sense of urgency, Lily turned and headed for the stairs. She had to get out. But as she reached the top, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Footsteps, heavier this time, coming from behind her. Someone was in the house. Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she rushed up the stairs, the sound of the footsteps growing louder behind her. She couldn't help but glance over her shoulder, but the shadows in the hallway were empty. The stillness in the house felt unnatural, almost as if the entire place was holding its breath. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she stumbled toward the front door, the weight of the bunker's secret heavy on her shoulders. The phone in her pocket buzzed again, but she didn't dare check it. There was no time. Someone was in the house, and she needed to leave before they found her. She threw open the door and stepped into the fading afternoon light, squinting against the brightness. The peaceful countryside, with its rolling hills and empty fields, felt worlds away from the dark secret hidden beneath her feet. Lily needed answers. She needed to understand what was going on. But the question was, who could she trust? Her mind went back to the message from Colonel Thatcher. He had been so cryptic when they met earlier, warning her that there were dangerous people who would stop at nothing to get their hands on whatever her uncle had hidden. But did that include him? Was he part of the group she needed to be wary of? A sudden crack of thunder shook her from her thoughts, and a distant rumble of a storm rolled in. She glanced at the horizon. Dark clouds were moving in fast. The storm would be here soon, and with it, whatever was lurking in the shadows. She needed to get back to the bunker, but this time, she wouldn't go in blind. She pulled her phone from her pocket and unlocked it. The buzzing had stopped, but the message still flashed on her screen. "Get out of the bunker. Now." The sender remained unknown, but the urgency of the message weighed heavily on her. She wasn't going to just walk back in and hope for the best. Lily needed a plan. She needed to know what her uncle had been involved in and what had been hidden here. And the best place to start was the file that had first caught her eye. Project Spectre. Turning toward the old shed behind the farmhouse, Lily jogged across the overgrown yard. The shed was a mess tool scattered across the floor, old paint cans, and broken furniture. But tucked in the far corner was an old filing cabinet, one that had likely belonged to her uncle before he passed. She moved quickly, her fingers trembling as she opened the top drawer, pulling out a stack of documents covered in dust. The first few pages were routine contract agreements, service records, but near the back, she found something far more interesting. A series of reports, all detailing military operations that her uncle had been part of. One paper in particular caught her attention. A declassified document about Project Spectre, the same project mentioned in the bunker. The document described the operation in vague terms, referencing a highly classified mission involving the storage and protection of military vehicles, technology, and equipment, much like the ones in the bunker. However, there was one line that stood out. Operation Spectre must remain hidden at all costs. The consequences of exposure are too great. Lily's fingers ran over the words, a deep sense of unease settling in her gut. The consequences of exposure? What could be so dangerous that her uncle had spent years keeping it hidden? She dug deeper, sifting through more files, each one revealing small pieces of a larger puzzle. One folder contained a list of names, some familiar, some not, but there was one name that stood out: Major Peter Hawke. The name was listed under a heading titled Final Retrieval Mission. Her mind raced. Major Hawke. The name felt familiar, but she couldn't place it. As she scanned the file further, a photo fell out from between the pages. It was a black and white image of a group of soldiers standing beside an armored vehicle, the men all wearing fatigues and looking stoic. At the center of the photo was a younger man, his face grim, his posture rigid. Major Peter Hawke. But what caught her attention wasn't the man's face, it was the patch on his shoulder. a symbol she recognized from her uncle's old military gear, a black hawk perched on a red background. Lily's breath caught in her throat. The insignia meant something, a connection to something larger than she had imagined. Her uncle's involvement with the military went far deeper than she realized, and it seemed like Project Spectre was at the center of it all. But what exactly had her uncle been guarding? As she stared at the photo, the wind began to pick up, howling through the trees outside. The storm was close now, and so was the danger. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. She quickly shoved the photo back into the folder and closed the drawer, the unease creeping back into her chest. She had to find out more about Major Peter Hawke, and fast. He might hold the key to everything, but the question was, where could she find him? Was he still alive? Was he connected to the same people who had sent the threatening message? Lily grabbed the folder, tucking it under her arm. As she headed back inside the farmhouse, she heard an engine in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. It wasn't a car. It was something much heavier. The vehicles from the bunker. Someone was coming for her. Lily's mind raced as she made her way back inside the farmhouse, clutching the folder tightly to her chest. The hum of the engine grew louder, sending an unsettling shiver down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was no longer alone. The storm had arrived, dark clouds swirling ominously above, casting shadows over the yard. She stopped by the window, peering out through the rain streaking down the glass. A black SUV pulled up in front of the farmhouse, its headlights cutting through the rain like twin searchlights. The engine rumbled to a stop, and the figure behind the wheel remained still for a moment, as if weighing the decision to get out. Finally, the door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a military jacket, his posture rigid, his gait deliberate. There was something about the way he moved, calm, but commanding, that immediately put Lily on edge. He walked toward the porch without hesitation, the storm soaking him as he approached the door. Lily's heart thudded in her chest. She didn't know this man, but she knew why he was here. He had to be connected to the military vehicles in the bunker, maybe even to Project Spectre itself. She glanced at the folder in her hands, her thoughts racing. Could he be connected to Major Peter Hawke? And what did he want with her? The knock came, sharp and deliberate, like a soldier who knew exactly what he was doing. Lily hesitated for a moment before walking to the door. She took a deep breath and opened it slowly. "Can I help you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, though it trembled slightly. The man didn't smile, his face serious and weathered. His eyes were sharp, like he was scanning her for any sign of weakness. There was an air of authority about him that made Lily's unease grow. "I'm Colonel William Thatcher," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "I knew your uncle. We worked together on Project Spectre." Lily's blood ran cold at the mention of the project. She had expected a visit, but not like this. Colonel Thatcher? She hadn't heard his name before, but she had seen it in the military reports from the bunker. His name had been associated with the operation, but not much more. "I'm sorry for your loss," Thatcher continued, his tone surprisingly gentle, though there was no warmth in his eyes. "Your uncle was a good man, but he kept a lot of things secret. There are people who would stop at nothing to get their hands on what's buried beneath this land." Lily nodded slowly, her mind racing. "What's buried beneath this land?" she asked cautiously. She had already uncovered the vehicles, but was there more? She had to know what he meant before she gave anything away. Thatcher's eyes flickered briefly, as if weighing how much to reveal. "I'm here to ensure that nothing happens to the assets your uncle was guarding. The military doesn't want those vehicles falling into the wrong hands, and neither do I." Lily's mind spun as she processed his words. Assets? Was he talking about the military vehicles, or was there something else involved? She had a lot of questions, but she knew better than to ask them all at once. She stepped back from the door, gesturing for him to come inside. "I don't suppose you'd like to tell me everything, would you?" Thatcher followed her inside without hesitation, wiping his boots on the mat before stepping into the dimly lit living room. He looked around the room, his gaze settling on the photographs on the walls, the old furniture, the worn furniture. The house felt empty, But it was more than that. It felt like a place lost in time, like a relic of something long gone. "You've found the bunker, I see," he said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Your uncle's legacy isn't just about the vehicles, though. There's a lot more going on here than meets the eye." Lily crossed her arms, trying to hide the unease that was beginning to take over her. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice sharp despite herself. "There's a reason why your uncle kept this hidden," Thatcher replied, his voice low. "He was protecting something. But I'm afraid it's not just the vehicles that are dangerous. It's the people who want them." Lily's eyes narrowed. "And you? Are you one of the people who wants them?" Thatcher met her gaze without flinching. "I'm not here for the vehicles. I'm here to make sure that they don't end up in the wrong hands. There are people who will do anything to get their hands on them, no matter the cost." Lily didn't trust him, not entirely. But something in his words resonated with her. If her uncle had hidden the vehicles for a reason, and if the people who were after them were dangerous enough to threaten her, then maybe Colonel Thatcher wasn't the enemy. Maybe he was the only one who could help her uncover the truth. "Why didn't you warn me sooner?" Lily asked, frustration creeping into her voice. "Why all the secrecy? If you knew about my uncle in the bunker, why not come sooner?" Thatcher's expression softened, just slightly. Your uncle was a man of pride. He didn't want to involve anyone in this, especially not his family. He kept the bunker a secret because he thought he could protect it on his own. But that was a mistake. Lily didn't know what to think. Was Thatcher truly on her side, or was he playing a game of his own? The uncertainty made her uneasy, but she didn't have much of a choice. The storm was here, the situation was escalating, and she needed answers. Answers that only Thatcher could provide. "Where do we go from here?" she asked, her voice steady but uncertain. "We work together," Thatcher said, his eyes narrowing. "We get to the bottom of this. Your uncle's legacy depends on it." The rain continued to pound against the windows of the farmhouse, a constant reminder of the storm that had enveloped the land. The wind howled through the trees outside, bending their branches in eerie shapes. Inside, Lily sat at the kitchen table, the weight of the world pressing on her chest. Colonel Thatcher had been silent for several minutes, studying the contents of the file she had handed him. His stern expression hadn't shifted once, his fingers tracing over the paper as if looking for something he had missed. Lily watched him, her thoughts racing. She didn't know if she could trust him, but with every passing second, it became clear that she had no other choice. He knew more about the vehicles, about her uncle's involvement, and about the hidden secrets that were now threatening to consume her. And more than that, he knew things that could help her uncover the full truth. "This Project Spectre," Lily began, breaking the silence. "What exactly is it? Why were those vehicles hidden away?" Thatcher looked up, his eyes cold, but thoughtful. Project Spectre was an operation designed to protect a very specific asset. The vehicles were part of it, equipped with technology that could change the course of global power. Your uncle's job was to safeguard them, keep them out of the wrong hands. Lily's stomach churned at his words. Global power. What kind of technology could those vehicles hold that was so valuable? "And you think I'm the one who's supposed to continue his work?" Lily asked, the bitterness creeping into her voice. She had never asked for this responsibility. She had never wanted to be tangled in her uncle's secret life. Thatcher's gaze softened, just for a moment. "No, Lily. But your uncle trusted you more than anyone else. You're the only one left who can finish what he started. And to do that, you'll need the key." Lily frowned. "The key?" He nodded slowly, his fingers tapping the edge of the file. "There's a hidden compartment in the bunker. Your uncle had it sealed off, and only the key could open it. Inside, you'll find the full blueprint for the operation. Everything you need to understand why those vehicles were locked away, and who will stop at nothing to control them." Lily's mind raced. A hidden compartment? A key? She glanced at the folder in her hands, flipping through the pages again, hoping to find some clue she had missed. But there was nothing. Nothing except the name Peter Hawke and a vague reference to a final retrieval mission. "Where do I find this key?" she asked, the urgency in her voice growing. Thatcher hesitated for a moment before answering. It's in the old barn, behind the west field. Your uncle had a safe there hidden beneath the floorboards. The key is inside, but you won't be the only one looking for it. Lily felt a chill run down her spine. Who else is after it? Thatcher's eyes darkened. People who don't want the truth to get out. People who will stop at nothing to keep this project buried. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Then I'll get it before they do. Wait, Thatcher said, his voice low and firm. You need to be careful. Whoever's after those vehicles isn't just interested in what they can do. They want control of everything your uncle protected. The bunker, the technology, and even you. Lily turned to face him, her heart pounding. Me? Thatcher nodded grimly. You're the key to everything. If they can't get to the vehicles, they'll come after you. But if you get the key first, you'll have the power to stop them. Lily stared at him, trying to process everything he had just said. She had come here looking for answers, just a simple inheritance, a broken-down farmhouse, and the lingering memories of her uncle. But now, she was caught in a tangled web of secrecy, danger, and a legacy she never asked for. I'm not just going to sit here and wait for them to come for me, she said, her voice steady but firm. I'm going to the barn. You'll need backup, Thatcher replied quickly, standing up from the table. I'm coming with you. Lily shook her head. No, I'm doing this on my own. I don't trust you. Not yet. Thatcher's gaze hardened, but he didn't argue. Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you. Without another word, Lily grabbed the flashlight from the counter and headed for the door. The rain had lightened, but the air was thick with the smell of earth and wet grass. The barn loomed in the distance, its silhouette barely visible against the gray sky. The key was out there, hidden in the floorboards, waiting to unlock the final piece of the puzzle. But the deeper Lily ventured into the field, the more she felt the weight of her uncle's past bearing down on her. The barn was just ahead now, and as she approached, her foot caught on something. She stumbled forward, catching herself against the damp ground. When she looked down, she saw the small brass key glinting in the mud, half buried beneath the dirt. Lily froze, her breath catching in her throat. There was no mistaking it. This was the key. She bent down, fingers trembling, and picked it up. It felt heavy in her hand, as if it carried the weight of all the secrets her uncle had left behind. As she stood up, she heard a rustling in the distance, footsteps approaching. Someone was coming. Lily's hand closed around the key, its cold metal pressing into her palm. For a moment, she simply stood there, staring at it, the weight of her discovery heavy in the air. It felt like a turning point, one that had set her on a path from which there was no return. The footsteps were growing louder, closer now. Lily quickly slid the key into the pocket of her jacket, her pulse racing. She looked around, trying to make sense of the situation. The barn was just ahead, its outline barely visible against the darkening sky. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle, but it still hung heavily in the air. She moved cautiously toward the barn, her boots sinking slightly into the wet ground. Every step felt deliberate, as though the earth itself was holding her back. She knew whoever was coming wasn't just a random person, this wasn't a coincidence. The way the message had been sent to her, the urgency behind it, and now, the footsteps closing in on her location, everything screamed danger. She reached the barn doors and pushed them open slowly, the rusted hinges creaking as they moved. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of wood, hay, and damp earth. A few scattered tools lay on the floor, forgotten and rusting. It looked like any old barn, nothing out of the ordinary. But Lily knew better now. She wasn't just standing in a barn. She was standing on the precipice of a truth her uncle had fought to keep hidden for years. The barn had been his last refuge, his last stand against whatever forces had been after the Project Spectre assets. It was no longer just about military vehicles. It was about protecting something far more dangerous. Lily felt the weight of that realization settle on her shoulders. Suddenly, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her. She spun around, her hand instinctively reaching for the flashlight at her side. But before she could react, a figure stepped out from the shadows of the barn's corner. It was a man, tall and lean, his features obscured by a hood and the shadow of the barn. His posture was tense, like a predator about to strike. Lily's heart skipped a beat. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins. The man didn't answer right away. He simply stood there, studying her with an unreadable expression. Finally, he spoke in a low, gravelly voice. "I could ask you the same thing," he replied, his eyes narrowing as he stepped into the dim light. "But I already know who you are. You're Lily Carter, the one who's been poking around in things you don't understand." Lily's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea who this man was, but the fear in his voice was real, too real. And there was something else in his eyes, a cold, calculating intensity that made her skin crawl. "What do you want?" she asked, her grip tightening on the flashlight. He smirked, the expression almost cruel. "I want what your uncle hid, and I don't want you standing in my way." Lily's mind raced. She had to think fast. This man knew too much about her uncle's project, and about the vehicles hidden in the bunker. He wasn't just some random person. He was connected to everything she was trying to uncover. "What do you know about Project Spectre?" she asked, her voice colder now. His eyes flickered. But he didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, closing the distance between them. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, but she held her ground. She wasn't about to let him intimidate her, not when she was this close to finding the truth. "You're smarter than I thought," the man finally said, his voice laced with disdain. "But you're still too naive to understand the gravity of what you've gotten yourself involved in." Lily's eyes narrowed. "Tell me, what is Project Spectre?" The man studied her for a moment, then sighed, almost as if he were bored. "It's bigger than you can imagine. Your uncle didn't just guard a few military vehicles. He was safeguarding a weapon, one that could change the balance of power in the world." Lily's stomach turned. A weapon? Was this what her uncle had been hiding all along? He took another step toward her, and Lily felt a sense of dread wash over her. "You think those vehicles are just some relics of a forgotten military project?" "No, they're part of something much more dangerous. And now, you're holding the key to it." Lily's mind reeled. This wasn't just about uncovering a secret stash of military equipment. This was about something far more sinister, something that could potentially alter the course of history. She glanced at the key in her pocket. The weight of it now felt like a threat. "What do you want with it?" she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, a slow, menacing grin. "What I want is simple. I want control, and I'm not leaving here without it." Lily's instincts kicked in. She needed to get away. She couldn't let him have what her uncle had protected, not if it meant the world could be thrown into chaos. She didn't know exactly what this weapon was, but she knew enough to understand that if the wrong hands got hold of it, the consequences could be catastrophic. Without warning, she turned on her heel and bolted for the barn doors. The man's voice rang out behind her, sharp and threatening. "You can't outrun this, Lily. You have no idea what you're dealing with." Her heart raced as she reached the door, pushing it open with all her strength. She stumbled outside, the cold rain hitting her like needles. But as she stepped out into the open field, a new sound broke through the storm, the unmistakable roar of an engine. The man wasn't the only one after her. Lily looked around, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had to move fast before it was too late. Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she bolted through the rain-soaked field, the sound of the approaching vehicle growing louder behind her. She didn't dare look back. She couldn't afford to lose precious seconds. Every instinct in her body screamed that she needed to get to the bunker, to unlock the hidden compartment before anyone else did. The key in her pocket felt like a ticking bomb, as though it were pulling her toward an inevitable fate. Her breath came in sharp gasps, the cold air stinging her lungs as she sprinted toward the farmhouse. She knew the barn wasn't safe anymore. If the man who had confronted her had an engine that loud, there were probably others who would be right behind him. But if she could make it to the bunker first, if she could unlock the compartment her uncle had sealed away, maybe, just maybe, she could control what came next. The farmhouse loomed ahead, its silhouette barely visible through the rain. She reached the door, her hand trembling as she pulled it open. The house felt like a fortress, but the panic inside her heart told her otherwise. She had no time to waste. Inside, the air was thick with the musty scent of old wood and damp earth. She moved quickly, slipping through the familiar rooms of the house, past the kitchen, toward the basement door. The key felt heavier with every step she took, its significance becoming clearer by the second. This was it, the moment that would either change everything or end in disaster. She reached the basement door and quickly unlocked it, stepping into the darkness below. The low hum of the bunker's ventilation system was the only sound as she descended the stairs, her feet moving soundlessly against the concrete floor. She could already feel the weight of the hidden vehicles pressing down on her. Those machines, the ones her uncle had kept buried for so long, were now the key to unlocking everything. She pulled the flashlight from her jacket and flicked it on, the beam cutting through the darkness. As she moved deeper into the bunker, the familiar shapes of the military vehicles appeared, standing like silent sentinels in the shadows. They seemed even more imposing in the dark, their outlines sharp and angular, but Lily's attention wasn't on the vehicles. It was on the far corner of the room, where a hidden compartment sat sealed under a heavy metal panel. Her uncle had done everything to ensure it remained hidden. Now, it was up to her to unlock it. She approached the panel cautiously, her hand hovering over the spot where the lock had been concealed. Her fingers brushed against the cold steel, and she felt a strange electric pull, as if something deep inside the bunker was calling to her. With a deep breath, she took the key from her pocket and inserted it into the lock. The mechanism clicked loudly, breaking the silence. Lily's pulse quickened. She twisted the key, and the heavy panel slowly slid open, revealing a hidden chamber underneath. Inside, her flashlight beam illuminated stacks of documents, maps, and a series of old military crates. She stepped forward, her hands shaking slightly as she rifled through the papers. It was all here, the full story. Her uncle's involvement, the classified nature of the operation, the assets, and the people who would do anything to get their hands on it. But there was one document that stood out among the others, a single sheet of paper marked with a red stamp. Top secret. The words on it were blurry at first, the rainwater in the room distorting her vision. But as she read the first line, her blood ran cold. Subject: Operation Spectre Asset Activation. Lily's hands trembled as she continued reading. The document detailed how the military vehicles weren't just transport vehicles, they were weaponized, capable of launching military strikes without any human intervention. These weren't just tools of war, they were autonomous, programmable machines designed for something far darker than she could have imagined. But what made it worse was the final line, written in bold letters. Once activated, there is no turning back. She took a deep breath, her mind racing. If the wrong people got their hands on this technology, the consequences could be devastating. She couldn't let that happen. But before she could process the full weight of the document, the sound of an engine roared outside, cutting through the stillness of the bunker. Lily's head snapped toward the entrance. Someone was coming closer now. The man from the barn, perhaps, or someone worse. Lily's eyes darted around the room, looking for a way out. The window. She could slip through the basement window, get to the side of the house, and escape. She had to. But as she turned to make her way to the window, her flashlight beam caught something else. A figure standing at the top of the stairs leading into the bunker. Her heart skipped a beat. "Lily," came the deep, familiar voice. It was Colonel Thatcher. The dim light from the flashlight danced off the walls of the bunker as Lily froze, staring up at the figure standing in the doorway. Colonel Thatcher's expression was unreadable, his face cast in shadows, but his eyes were fixed on her with a mix of concern and something darker, something that made Lily's pulse quicken in alarm. "You shouldn't have gone in there, Lily," Thatcher said, his voice low and controlled. He stepped forward slowly, each movement deliberate, as though weighing every word he said. The sound of the engine from outside still lingered, distant but unmistakable, growing louder. Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she gripped the papers tighter in her hands. She had just uncovered the truth, Operation Spectre, the weaponized vehicles, the potential global consequences, and now Colonel Thatcher was standing in front of her, blocking her only way out. "Why?" Lily asked, her voice shaking with frustration and anger. "Why did you let me go this far? Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Thatcher didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her with a cold, calculating gaze, as though gauging whether to reveal something she wasn't ready to hear. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. "It wasn't my choice," he said quietly. "Your uncle made sure of that. He buried everything, locked it away so no one could find it. And he didn't want you involved, Lily. He didn't want you anywhere near this." Lily stepped back, her mind reeling. She had trusted him, had hoped that maybe, just maybe, he was on her side. But now, hearing his words, it felt like everything had been a lie. "What do you mean? He didn't want me involved?" Lily demanded. "This is my inheritance, my family's history. I'm already involved, so don't tell me that this is about protecting me." Thatcher's jaw tightened. "I'm not trying to protect you, Lily. I'm trying to protect the world from what your uncle left behind. And you," he paused, looking away briefly before his eyes locked on hers again. "You're the only one who can stop it." Lily felt a chill run down her spine. "Stop what?" Thatcher didn't answer immediately, instead stepping closer. He lowered his voice to a near whisper. "The technology in those vehicles, it's more than just military might. It's an advanced form of artificial intelligence, capable of making decisions without human input. Your uncle never told you this, but the project was never about just keeping the vehicles hidden. It was about keeping them from activating. If they're powered on, well, there's no telling what could happen. They could initiate a conflict, set off a chain reaction that we can't control. They're more dangerous than you can imagine." Lily's head spun. Everything she had thought she understood about her uncle's project was unraveling before her eyes. He had protected this information, kept it hidden, not just for his own safety, but for the world's. But there was something in Thatcher's eyes, something that felt off. He was too calm, too calculated, as though he wasn't just trying to protect the project, but he was willing to manipulate her into something she didn't fully understand. "What do you want from me, Colonel?" she asked, her voice sharp. Thatcher's lips curled into a thin, humorless smile. "I don't want anything from you, Lily. I'm here to make sure you don't make the same mistake your uncle did. The vehicles need to stay locked away." "But you..." He paused, his gaze flickering over her like a predator sizing up its prey. "You might be the only one who can access the final failsafe. Your uncle left the key with you for a reason. It's not just the physical key. It's you, Lily. You're the one who can shut them down for good." The weight of his words hit her like a wave. She could feel the tension in her chest tighten, the reality of the situation pressing down on her. He was asking her to take responsibility for something she barely understood. "But why didn't you tell me this before?" she demanded. "Why keep me in the dark?" Thatcher's expression hardened, and for a moment, Lily thought she saw something flicker in his eyes, something almost like regret. "Because," he said, his voice growing more intense, "if you knew the truth, you might have run. You might have thrown the key away and let it all burn, and I couldn't let that happen." Lily shook her head, her mind whirling. "You're not telling me everything," she muttered. "There's more to this. I can feel it." Thatcher took a step back, running a hand through his wet hair. "I didn't want to drag you into this. But now that you're involved, there's no going back. The military knows about the project. They're coming. And if we don't act quickly, they'll take control." Lily's breath hitched as she processed what he was saying. The military? If they knew about the vehicles and their power, then everything was about to escalate. There was no safe place anymore. The only thing that mattered now was finding a way to prevent the project from falling into the wrong hands. "You're lying," Lily spat. "I can't trust you anymore. I don't know who you're working for, but it's not me." Thatcher's expression turned cold, his gaze sharpening as though he had just been pushed to his limit. You don't have a choice, Lily. You may not trust me, but you will trust this. If the military gets their hands on the vehicles, we won't be able to stop them. You have the key. The future of everything depends on what you do with it. Lily stood there, the cold concrete of the bunker floor beneath her, the weight of the key in her pocket growing heavier with every passing second. She was standing at the crossroads of a decision that could change the fate of the world. And now, it seemed, there was no turning back. Lily stood in the dim light of the bunker, the cold metal walls seeming to close in on her. Her pulse was pounding in her ears as she tried to process everything Thatcher had just told her. The weight of the decisions ahead felt like it was crushing her, and for the first time since she'd stepped into her uncle's farmhouse, she felt completely alone. Thatcher's words echoed in her mind. You're the only one who can shut them down for good. She had the key, but she had no idea what it would truly unlock. The vehicles, the advanced technology, the weaponized AI. It was all too much. Too much to comprehend, too much to control. And yet, it was hers to handle. What do you want me to do? Lily asked, her voice tight with the pressure of the situation. She glanced over at the pile of documents she had found earlier, the information about Project Spectre, about the vehicles, about the dangers her uncle had been hiding. She had seen enough to know that these were no ordinary machines. They were far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Thatcher stepped forward, his face set with determination. We need to stop the activation sequence, he said, his voice low but urgent. The vehicles can be remotely triggered. If the military gets control of them, they'll use them for global destabilization. They'll wreak havoc, and no one will be able to stop them. Your uncle designed a fail-safe, something to ensure the vehicles stayed dormant, but we need to access it before anyone else does. Lily nodded slowly, trying to suppress the rising panic inside her. The stakes were higher than she had thought, and she was the only one who had the key to stop it. But a nagging feeling lingered. Why had Thatcher waited until now to tell her everything? And more importantly, could she trust him? If we stop them, she said cautiously, her voice steady despite the uncertainty gnawing at her. What happens then? What will the military do? Thatcher's eyes darkened. They'll stop at nothing to get what they want. But if we act quickly, if we can shut down the activation process before it's too late, we can stop them from ever getting their hands on the vehicles. Lily's mind raced. The bunker had already proven to be a place full of secrets, and now she was caught in the middle of an international conspiracy. The weight of the key in her pocket felt like a constant reminder of her responsibility, but it was also a symbol of her own uncertainty. She wasn't prepared for this. She wasn't ready to take on the weight of the world. But she had no choice. We need to move fast, she said, her voice firmer now. She turned toward the stack of papers, searching for anything that could help them. Where do we go from here? Thatcher stepped forward, grabbing a few of the documents and spreading them out on the table. This is where your uncle's security system comes into play. He set up a series of encrypted fail-safes, passwords, codes, and firewalls to keep anyone from activating the vehicles without authorization. We need to get into the system and shut it down manually. Lily stared at the papers. The codes, the security protocols, her head spun as she tried to absorb the complexity of it all. She wasn't a hacker, and she wasn't a military strategist. She was just a woman caught in the crossfire of a global conspiracy, her only weapon a small brass key that could unlock the fate of millions. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered, the weight of the moment overwhelming her. Thatcher didn't respond right away. Instead, he placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm but reassuring. You can, he said simply. You have the strength of your uncle in you. He trusted you to carry this burden. Lily swallowed hard, her throat tight. She didn't feel strong. She didn't feel capable. But she also knew that if she didn't take action now, everything her uncle had protected would be in the hands of those who would use it for destruction. She had to try. I'll do it, she said, her voice unwavering. I'll stop them. As she spoke those words, something shifted inside her. The fear, the uncertainty, it didn't go away, but it no longer controlled her. There was a fire in her chest now, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. She wasn't just uncovering a secret anymore. She was taking control of her own destiny. Thatcher gave her a sharp nod. Good. We don't have much time. Together they moved toward the computers at the far side of the bunker, the hum of the machinery and the low buzz of the fluorescent lights filling the room. Lily's hands were steady now as she sat down at the terminal. She had no idea what she was doing, but the key in her pocket, the files in front of her, and the weight of her uncle's legacy pushed her forward. She started typing, following the instructions on the encrypted documents, the codes flashing across the screen. The words began to make sense. Firewall disengaged, access granted, failsafe deactivated. With each line of text, she could feel herself getting closer to the final step. But then, the screen flickered, and a warning flashed across the monitor. Unauthorized access detected. System compromised. Lily's breath hitched. Thatcher, what's happening? Someone's trying to override the system, he said urgently. They've already breached the first layer of security. We need to hurry. Lily's fingers flew over the keyboard, her heart racing as the system fought back. She could hear the pounding of her own heartbeat in her ears, the overwhelming pressure of time running out. She had to finish this, or everything would be lost. Just as she thought the system might shut down, a new message popped up. Shutdown sequence aborted. Activating global protocol. Lily's eyes widened. It's too late. They've already triggered it. Lily's fingers hovered over the keyboard, the final warning flashing on the screen in bright red letters. The system had been breached, and there was nothing she could do to stop it now. Her stomach churned as the words activating global protocol burned into her mind. The vehicles, the weaponized technology her uncle had spent years protecting, were no longer dormant. The countdown had begun. A loud noise erupted from behind her, metal creaking, a whirring sound building in intensity. Lily's head snapped toward the source of the noise. Thatcher, who had been standing at the far side of the room, was already pulling out a series of backup files from a small secure terminal. We've got to get out of here, he said, his voice urgent. If they're activating the vehicles, we need to stop them before they're deployed. They could cause mass destruction worse than anything we've ever seen. Lily felt her hands shaking, the weight of the situation settling over her. Mass destruction, she had seen the documents. She knew what the vehicles were capable of. But now, it wasn't just the machines she had to worry about. There were others involved, people who would stop at nothing to control these assets. And Lily knew, deep down, that those people weren't far behind. She grabbed the backup files from Thatcher's hands, her eyes scanning the data. Where are the vehicles? She demanded, her voice tense. Where can we shut them down? Thatcher's eyes darkened. They're not here. They've already been triggered. The system will guide them to their deployment sites. We have to intercept the signal before it's too late. Lily's thoughts raced. Intercept the signal? How? She had no experience with hacking military tech. But she did have the key. Her uncle had trusted her with it for a reason, and that reason was becoming painfully clear. She needed to stop this, and she needed to do it fast. Suddenly, the lights in the bunker flickered, the overhead fluorescent lights buzzing in protest. The machines around them hummed louder, as if they were coming to life, awaiting some unknown command. It was a race against time, and Lily had no idea what her next move should be. Without warning, the ground beneath them rumbled, and the walls shook. The vehicles, those cold, dormant machines, were coming to life. Lily felt the floor tremble beneath her feet as the hum of the machines grew louder, a deep, almost mechanical growl vibrating through the air. There's no more time, Thatcher said, his voice sharp. You need to shut it all down. Now, before it's too late. Lily turned back to the terminal, trying desperately to make sense of the chaotic commands flashing across the screen. She had to override the system. She had to stop the vehicles from activating. With trembling hands, she typed the override codes she had found earlier in the bunker, trying each combination as fast as she could. The screen blinked and flickered, lines of red text moving too quickly for her to follow. She was getting closer, but the pressure was mounting. Every second counted. "Lily!" Thatcher shouted, pulling her away from the terminal as another rumble shook the bunker. "We need to get out of here now." But Lily couldn't move. She couldn't walk away from the only chance they had to stop what was coming. Her fingers flew over the keys again. "Almost there," she muttered to herself. The screen flashed once more, and then a final warning appeared. "Shutdown complete. Deactivating global protocol." Lily's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't thought it was possible. She had done it. The vehicles, the entire operation had been deactivated. But just as the relief began to sink in, a sharp sound echoed from the speakers above. The loud beeping of the alarm system blared in the room, and a new message appeared. Warning: unauthorized system access detected. Immediate security lockdown initiated. Thatcher swore under his breath. "It's not over yet. They're locking us in." Lily's heart dropped. She had deactivated the system, but now it seemed like the bunker itself was turning against them. Steel doors slammed shut with a loud clang, and the lights flickered before going dark, leaving them in total blackness. The only sound was the drumming of rain against the bunker walls, and Lily's breath as she tried to calm herself. "We're trapped," she whispered, her mind racing. But before Thatcher could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. Someone was coming, and they weren't here to help. Lily turned toward the door, knowing they had no time to waste. "Thatcher, what now?" He met her gaze, his expression grim but resolute. "Now, we escape. We'll take the information and make sure they can't use it. We'll get this to the authorities before they can shut us down completely." The two of them moved quickly toward the back exit, where the storm still raged outside, their only option being to flee into the night. Behind them, the bunker's heavy doors were still locked tight, the air thick with the sense that they were running out of time. Lily glanced at the key in her hand. Her uncle had given it to her for a reason. She had stopped something dangerous, but now the fight was far from over. There was more to uncover, more people to face, and more secrets to unravel. But for the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone in this fight. The legacy her uncle had left behind was hers now to protect, and she would see it through, no matter the cost. The storm raged above them, but Lily Carter was no longer afraid of the darkness.